Good morning, everyone. Yes, just as said yesterday, we're going to start early as 9, and I meant the words, so we're starting. Thank you so much for everyone who joined yesterday and who is also sitting here today. We'll try to make sure we finish quite early today. I welcome you to the day 2 of the West African Internet Governance Forum, happening here live in Ghana and many people online. It's happening at Airport View Hotel, Ghana, and I'm sure we will have an awesome deliberation today. A few things before we start. There is, for those who are French, there is the headphones at the back. You can always pick up. For those online, you can always tune in and listen to French if you want to. So you can pick up the headphones behind if you want to listen to what I'm saying in French. And you could change the channels online if you want to listen to what I'm saying in French. This morning, we'll be having an awesome section, very important section, that focus on digital inclusion and access. And we are having who else to speak about in this section than the people who make legislation in our different countries. So we'll have an MP track, a parliamentarian track to speak about digital inclusion and access. We will start this section by introducing the moderator. And the moderator for this session is Lily Boshwe. Lily, as of today, is currently the outgoing curator for Accra Hub. She is an executive director at the Hack Lab Foundation and a master's student who researches on the development of technology in service of public needs. As an aspiring tech policy analyst, she speaks widely on issues related to the internet and with a particular interest in women and youth inclusion. Lily, over to you. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you're listening or joining in from. And we are so thankful for the gift of the internet that allows us to be connected on site and also online for those who are not able to be there. But also, Akwaba to the motherland. I'm Ghanaian, and we are excited to host this year's West African Internet Governance Forum. As Joshua rightly said, we want to make this as interactive and pretty much concise with our timing, so we don't keep so long with the session running, so we can make time for the others to also follow through. We have this parliamentary track this morning that is going to be discussing data innovation and privacy in West Africa. To a large extent, it's going to extend to the rest of Africa to see what is happening, especially in the wake of the pandemic, and lessons we can pick regarding data privacy and innovation. I have our parliamentarians who are joining us from across the sub-region and also the continent. And I'm going to be introducing them shortly. They will kickstart the conversation. So we have Honorable Lydia Lamisi Akanvariba. She's part of the Ghanaian Parliament and also part of the Committee for ICT and Communication in Ghana. We have Honorable Koroney Massani, who is part of the West African Alhajie Parliamentary Track and Network, and also Honorable Alhajie Mbowe, who is a Member of Parliament, Gambia National Parliament. We also have Neema Lugangira, who's an Honorable Member from the Parliament in Tanzania, and should also be joining us. Now, thinking about the topic we have today, we are looking to see how or what lessons have come up for us, especially in the wake of the pandemic, with regards privacy, post-COVID, and what lessons we've picked as nations to be able to galvanize development across the sub-region. So we're going to kickstart that conversation, and I'm going to come to you, Honorable Alhajie Mbowe, and we're going to kickstart the conversation by asking first off what, as a national standpoint, from the Gambian perspective, what the transformation looks like when it comes to digitalization and also what's happening on the ground. So by way of a general overview of where Gambia is with regards to transformation as a country and linking it also to the sub-region, I want to hear from you, Honorable Alhajie Mbowe. Then we go on to the conversation on privacy and data innovation.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
From across Africa. And I would say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And thank you very much for having me on the West African IGF this morning. especially on the parliamentary track. Like you said earlier, I'm a member of parliament in the Gambia National Parliament and also the chairperson of the Committee on Education, Training and ICT. I'm also a member of the Pan-African Parliament in Johannesburg, South Africa, where I'm also a member on the Science and Technology Committee. Now, when we look at the transformation that we just talked about, you know, when you look at across, you're going to see that you look at the health area, you look at the business sector, you look at also the social services that actually we have, you know, as a continent or as a country. You're going to see that the COVID itself actually has affected us a lot. But let me tell you first where Gambia is before we get to that area. Now, you know, when we're talking about digital transformation, first you have to look at the infrastructure that is actually available. Now, in the Gambia, we have the national ICT infrastructure. We have the submarine cable that the country actually is connected to as far as the internet is concerned. We also have the Eco-1 fiber backbone, which is about 917 kilometers, Gambia being a very small country. Then we, 2 years ago in 2020, we also have the national broadband network that actually put a network across the country from one part of Gambia to the other part of the Gambia. And that's about 420 kilometers. And then we also have the e-government data center that's actually been built now, and then also the national broadband network data center as well. So as far as infrastructure is concerned, at this moment, Gambia actually has the submarine cable. We also have the fiber backbones from one part of the country to the other part of the country with various loops in the country. Now, in terms of policies and strategies in the Gambia, we have the ICT for Development Policy Statement, which is from 2018 to 2028. We also have the ICT for Development Master Plan, which is 2020 to 2024. We have these two strategic documents that have been validated by the ministry in collaboration with various stakeholders. That is really giving us, you know, pathway to this digitization or digital transformation in this country. Now, together with all that, again, we also have the broadband policy and the strategy. We also have the cybersecurity policy. We have the human capital development through.
I think Dr. Honorable Mbowe is frozen, maybe a network issue. Right. There is an issue with Honorable Mbowe's network, and we'll try to get him back. But pretty much an interesting standpoint on where Gambia is currently. He's moved and spoken about how we have transformation and the subtle, I mean, we have a whole change when it comes to healthcare, like he said. He mentioned transportation, he's mentioned other parts in education, and he moved us on a very good journey, telling us about. Honorable Mbowe, can you hear me? Right. So if you're just joining in, we are trying to discuss this morning on the parliamentary track about data innovation and privacy, and have honorable members from around the sub-region and also the continent join us for this discussion. We were just listening to Honorable Mbowe. Yes, I can see you now. Yes, welcome back.
Yes. So yeah, the last item I want to talk about is the promotion of technology, neutral, legal and regulatory regime. That's the advanced broadband ICT also we have. Now, as far as legal and regulatory instruments are concerned in the Gambia, we also have the ICT Act of 2009. We also have the Access to Information Act of 2021. And at this point, we are developing the cybersecurity and data protection laws in the Gambia at this moment in time. And we are told that before the end of this year, they will be brought to Parliament for enactment. And I may also say that we also have the Gambia Information and Communication Technology Agency that was approved by the Parliament in 2020. And this is the agency that will be responsible for the overall ICT development in this country related to various sectors across the spectrum in the Gambia. So the agency has already been approved by the Parliament, it's enacted. So now what is left is to operationalize it in the Gambia. So as far as the Gambia is concerned, I will stop there to show you this is exactly what we have in terms of policies, and this is what we have in terms of legal and regulatory instruments at this moment in time.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking us on this journey. You've truly mentioned to us how different areas or stakeholders are involved when it comes to the transformational agenda. You've moved from policies and strategy to advanced broadband strategies through to infrastructure, and even mentioned legislation. And that is pretty much what we mean by the multi-stakeholder approach. And we want to have this conversation, or even some of these, trickle down to other countries in the sub-region. So thank you for that, and for sharing generally what the transformation has been in the wake of the pandemic. Now let's look at what's happening post-COVID. So for right now, what we know that there's been some lessons that we've gathered when it comes to what COVID has taught us. So let's go and look at the data protection parts or frameworks that exist currently on the continent and what you're doing. Now, people are thinking about where their information is collected and what their information is collected and used for, who's controlling it, and all that. Now, we've seen that also riding on data is digitalization and transformation, very heavy on data and trying to get insight from the data. So I want to know, regarding data protection frameworks, for example, the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Data Protection, it has many, it mentions many things about personal identification and data about people. And you're looking at how countries have adopted them. Why is there a little bit of lag when it comes to countries ratifying this? We have only about 8 ratifications out of the 15 required. Is that an issue why this has not been ratified probably amongst countries, and what can be done in that light to help protect citizens who are also pretty much giving out data?
Yes, thank you very much. You know, the AU Convention on cybersecurity and personal data protection essentially is a legal framework that actually guides to create policies and strategies to actually, domesticate these issues. But you are quite right. We need 15 ratifications for it to be effective. So far, I think we have about almost 10. Now, and again, we are talking about since 2014. We are talking about almost more than 8 years that countries are really very slow in the ratification. Now, there are several issues in the ratification. Because I'm a member of the Pan-African Parliament, and I know we've been exposed to this convention 2-3 years ago. But what was clear in that workshop is that most MPs have never heard about it. So which means the awareness was not there. So when you look at that, which means there's some kind of breakdown from the executive level to the parliament. Because what happened is, but I may also need to point out 2 things in Africa here, because when you are English speaking, you are a dualist country, meaning that your local laws and in all international laws, they need to be ratified for it to become legal in your own country. Now, if you look at the Francophone, you are talking about the monist, meaning they have a separate legal system, meaning that the international laws and the local laws, they manifest almost in a single concept. They manifest the same thing, but in the Anglophone, it's quite different. Now, once these things are ratified, most African countries that are English speaking, they have to be ratified in parliament, meaning those laws actually have to be taken on board locally through an act of parliament for them to be effective. Now, there was the communication at the level of the executive and the parliament. I think there is a complete breakdown because most MPs, I tell you, they are not even aware of this convention. And this is a very important convention for the African continent. And at the end of the day, it's the parliament that will ratify it. Because the executive can go and sign in Addis or wherever it is to sign the convention. But after signing, they have to bring back the document to parliament for ratification. Now, if you look at the Gambia, for example, all international agreements, all these conventions have to be brought to parliament for it to be ratified before they are actually effective. And that's not actually happening. So you're going to see that it's very clear that the slow pace ratification, in fact, at one point, you can actually pinpoint that there's miscommunication. We mean there's a communication breakdown between the executive and also the national parliament that need to ratify. Another area also that I can also identify in this thing is the notion of we don't have capacity in Africa. You know, sometimes when you look at these documents or you look at this particular area, you said, oh, we don't have this in Africa. We actually have them. The point I'm trying to say here is we cannot just stand here and say we don't have capacity. You may say you may not have the capacity, but there are other people in your own country that actually have the capacity to be able to execute. So as far as cybersecurity is concerned, we have a lot of experts in this continent, but it's about the will of the government that need to bring this thing on board. Now, we understand that the government can do all things on their own, but we also have alliances. We also have other stakeholders that could work, like CEOs. We also have the Africa Cyber, Alliance. I mean, you name them. They can work together, help you to ensure that we bring the policies or the strategies that are in place to ensure that these ratifications are done. Now, the question is, do you put capacity first, then you ratify, or do you ratify and then you bring in capacity? So for me, I think they can go side by side. Let's ratify and let's understand what it actually contains. And let's use that document to create the path on which the countries can create their policies, can create their strategies, can also create the legislative framework on which they can do their laws, and et cetera, et cetera. For me, I think the biggest challenge we have is the communication between the executive and the parliamentarian to ensure they understand that we have this in place, which is very important. That's the AU Convention. Let's bring it on board, let's study it together, and let's ratify it, and then create the legal framework. Now, in the Gambia here, I can tell you, I in fact ended up putting a parliamentary question. Summoning the minister to come to parliament and tell me why is this not ratified. So he's yet to parliament, but I'm sure he's going to come to parliament and tell me why it's not ratified. So I'm sure from Gambia will actually ratify it. Because for me, I don't see any reason. Parliament is ready. Parliament is waiting. We are now aware because of the Pan-African Parliament. So we want the minister to bring this document to be ratified in the parliament. And so Gambia will be a signatory. And above all, the ministry actually has developed a lot of policies, a lot of strategies with regards to cybersecurity and personal data protection. So for me, Gambia is ready. So it's just a matter of bringing it on board to the parliament for it to be ratified. And I can see that the same issue is actually happening in countries. Some parliamentarians are not even aware that we have such a convention, such a wonderful convention that can guide countries in the creation of policies, in the creation of strategies, and laws that would help us to guide our critical infrastructure as far as information is concerned. For me, I think that's the number one area. And the other one is really the lack of being aware of this actually exists.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for shedding light on that. We've been trying, if you just joined in, we've been trying to know why there is the existence of the African Union Convention since 2014, with a process starting maybe from 2011, but with only a few countries ratifying and others yet to ratify. So this is a convention on cybersecurity and data protection. And because you're talking about privacy, we want to see how people are protected with the data they're giving out. And Alhajie has just moved us on that journey and mentioned two things he's notified as a reason why there are issues. The first is the miscommunication or the communication breakdown between the executive and the legislative arm. So an executive member can ratify, but it's parliament that really passes the law and everything, or ratifies exactly. And so there have to be some understanding. So there's a lack of awareness in that light, and pretty well that is very much communicated. And you mentioned also the lack of capacity, and something that has to be looked at from all angles. And thank you for shedding light on that. So we'll come back to you in a short while, but we are happy also to be joined by the Honorable Neema from Tanzania. And Madam, if you are here, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. And we are going to have your thoughts right now on what the transformation agenda and or digitalization agenda looks like for you in Tanzania and pretty much the whole of the continent.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, and congratulations for this amazing event. The first thing that I can say, whenever we're talking about digital transformation in Africa, we really, really, really need to remember the peripheral regions. This is something that I always say, you know, oftentimes we gauge our development efforts in the urban areas or in the groups of people who are closer to the system. And we forget the majority of people live in the peripherals, in the rural areas. And that is where the potential of unlocking their economies through digital development and, you know, transformation would create and would make the biggest difference. But in order to do that, we need to look at infrastructure. You know, we cannot just talk about digital transformation without looking at infrastructure. I come from a peripheral region. If 3 out of 7 days every week, I don't have power, no electricity, how will I be able to fully utilize this digital transformation? Or if the cost of data is beyond what I can afford, what can I do then? The cost of mobile and just a simple thing as availability of network. You know, there are parts in Kagera whereby it's easier to get a network from MTN Rwanda or MTN Uganda than the Tanzanian network. Yes. So, you know, simple things like that, just the normal mobile connectivity, 2G, So we really need to take into account these issues, but also digital transformation brings an opportunity to journalists. You know, how can rural media take advantage of digital so that the stories that they get or the needs from the communities will reach a wider audience? So to me, when I'm looking at digital transformation in Africa, it's stressing that we need to remember peripheral regions. We need to put deliberate efforts for school connectivity, but also the health system, the health sector connectivity. Because most of our hospitals, like if you start from a dispensary, health center, maybe district hospital to the main hospital, they don't speak to each other. There's an opportunity there through the digital. So that's on one end. But on the other hand, is making sure that, you know, there's so many interventions that the government is doing in order to be more digital, and they're collecting a lot of data from us. How is that data protected? You know, I'm sure even yourself, Lily, maybe sometimes you get surprised and you receive these promotion text messages.
Absolutely.
How is the mobile company giving out my number to some organization to send me promotional text messages on a topic maybe I don't want? So isn't that an invasion of privacy? Why is my number being distributed? So it means even the mobile networks are using the data they're collecting for us for their good, because I'm sure that company pays the money, but why are they doing it? Is it allowed to do that? So we also need to look at the way in which data is being collected and used. So that calls for the need of data privacy, data protection, and most of our African countries don't yet have a data protection act, privacy act. So those are kind of things also that we need to look at. And then finally is, of course, ourselves as parliamentarians. Most of the times, and I commend, I commend like this platform here, bringing on board myself and Honorable Alhajie, because most of the times these digital related discussions are being done by the tech savvy, and you tend to leave the politicians aside, because probably, Lily, you're thinking, these politicians, they won't get it. They won't get us. You know, they're going to slow us down. But then what you don't realize, if you don't involve us at the early stage, let us slow you down at that stage so that we move together in an alignment later on, when now the power is on our side and there's nothing the tech people can do. Then what happens? Then later on you complain, you see our politicians, they just created this act, they don't get it, they're making things so difficult. So we need to come together and work together. And here, I would like to convey my sincere gratitude to the United Nations IGF and the African IGF, because for over a year I've been working on trying to set up the African Parliamentarian Network on Internet Governance. And very recently, Honorable Alhajie has also joined the board and been supporting me. And I'm so excited that I think this year we're going to launch it. So this will be a stepping stone in getting more parliamentarians involved. So I hope that you will all take full advantage of that and involve us. Let us slow you down now and not later. Thank you, Lily.
Thank you. So it will take the coordination of governments, of legislation, of big tech, of consumers to implement some of these common bedrock principles when it comes to cybersecurity and data protection, and essentially to move towards digitalization. And like you mentioned, and also echoed by Alhajie, you've mentioned the issues of infrastructure, and even drawn our minds to considering the peripherals. I mean, the people in hinterlands, people in underserved or under-resourced communities. And so thank you for sharing on that. So the conversation has been moving now on what it looks like for transformation and digitalization on the African continent. And we can see some of the similar issues from the different countries. We now want to go in person to Honorable Lamisi, who's from Ghana and also part of the Ghanaian parliament, and also to see what it looks like in Ghana now. I mean, the pandemic taught us some things, what has been done even post-COVID. So, Madam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me this morning. I'm most grateful to the organizers of this program. In the Ghanaian parliament, a lot of things has been done for data protection and internet fraud. We are most grateful to the Parliament of Ghana and the government of Ghana for most of the activities that is being done post-COVID for data protection. Now let's come to what is happening in Ghana here today. Currently, we have the data protection legislation for Ghana. We also have the Internet, the Cyber Security Act. That's Act 1038, 2020. And then we have the legislation for the Data Protection Agency. Currently, it is under the Ministry of Communication that we have these organizations who are taking care of our data. Let's come back to the telecost. You go to an organization where your data is taken. They take down all your biodata. How is that data protected? We as parliamentarians, we are just to make sure that the legislation is in progress, but the enforcement agencies, like Ministry of Communication, which oversees the activities of the data protection agencies. We are doing this together with the National Identification Authority, and that is why the SIM re-registration has to take the data of people from the NIA for whatever they want to do or what the re-registration of the SIM is. Why are we doing all these things? It's because of the cybercrime. Today, cybercrime is becoming a problem in our country. You go out and you see a lot of things on the internet which you cannot understand. One of the issues about the cybercrime is that it is an internet activity that involves a lot of people. So if your data is not protected, then it means that today we are in trouble. Another issue that we want to look at is the telecost. If today you wake up in the morning and you see some messages that you don't understand or you don't want to, people are sending you messages for loan. People are sending you messages for adverts. People are sending you messages for medication. People are sending you messages for a whole lot of things. Where do they get your data? Where do they get your information? That is the reason why we need our data protected. If we don't do it now, like the other MP said, it means that in the near future, we are likely to all be in a problem. So, as parliamentarians or as members of parliament, what we do is to make sure that the enabling legislature is out there. But who is the person in charge of the implementation? So today it is in Ghana, for instance, it's not about legislature, it's about implementation. We in Ghana, we have all the enabling legislature for us to make sure that our data is protected. But still, we still have a lot of problems going on because we don't have the necessary backing or the necessary people who are implementing our data protection to make sure that the data is protected. I can't see myself giving my data to an organization. For instance, you go to any of the buildings, they'll say, put down your name, your telephone number, where you are coming from, what kind of business you do. And that is data. It's a valid data. It's very, very important. Your bio data is something that needs to be protected. So we need the implementation agencies to be up and doing. And that comes back to the Ministry of Communication. the Ministry of Communication should make sure that whatever or whoever takes our data should protect it, so that we don't wake up in the morning and somebody has your number and the person is giving you an opportunity to take a loan. If the person is giving you an opportunity to take a loan, the person can equally use your data for something else. So we really need to look at it from that angle. Then the telecoms. Why is it that the telecoms cannot protect our data? They cannot protect our phone numbers. They cannot protect whatever they have taken from us, so that other people don't use it. I don't have any activities with a banking organization or financial institution. How do they get my data to send me a message that I can take a loan from them? It means that the implementation agencies are not doing something right. And I think all of us should be up and doing to make sure that everything is well done and our data is protected. Again, let's look at the NIA. Today, they are telling us, or the Ministry of Communication is saying that you can only have your SIM registered if you have a Ghana card. Why is it so? It's to protect our data. It's to protect our information. So if we as people or Ghanaians or implementation agencies have given our data to the Ghana, the National Identification Authority, and today the National Identification Authority has given that data back to the telecoms, is it protected? Are we sure that the telecoms can protect our data and protect it well, so that we don't go out there and find messages, informations that we don't need? The data is also linked to our various homes, because before you are taking your national identification card, they are using your digital address system. Is it protected? Let us be sincere to ourselves. They've taken my digital address system, given me a card, and that card, my information is on it, is going into the telecoms. Whoever is privileged to that information can use it for any other thing. Because you can use my card or the data on my card to trace me to my home. Is it safe? It's not safe. It is not really, really safe. So data protection agencies and cybersecurity has to be up and doing to make sure that our data is protected, because the world is becoming a global village. It's becoming everything we want to be into. We want to be digitalized. That is why we are doing this. So if I want my country, if I want digitalization in my country, and the people in that country, their data is not protected, then we have a long way to go. That's why people are not willing to give out their data. And we should look at it critically and talk about it and make sure that the telecoms, the data they are taking from us or they are taking from the National Identification Authority is well protected. And the Data Protection Agency, backed by law, should be able to make sure that every processed data that they have in their system is well protected because of digitalization of this, our current internet communication. So, by and large, for us as Ghanaians, we have done our best. All the enabling legislation is there. Then as people, we should also be mindful with the fact that the telecoms are providing us with services. With the fact that they provide us with services, it doesn't end there. Though they provide us with the service, we are increasingly disposing our data to them, and a lot of people are using it to their own advantage. For instance, I travel outside the country. When you go to a place like the United Emirates, it is difficult for you to make a call. a direct call. Why? It is because they want to protect certain information from the country. But in Ghana here, everything is good to go. Everything
right.
goes, yeah.
So I'm going to come back to you, Madam, in a short while. And you said you've really given us, this is a call to action. You've given us what happens to be the gap between legislation and implementation or enforcement.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much very, very profound when it comes to what has been laid as a foundation to be able to make some of this protective, the protection go on smoothly, but then the enforcement or the implementation still is left hanging.
Yeah.
So that is where the question arises. Yeah. How do we make sure that people meant to enforce or implement are doing as directed? And you've mentioned, this hits close to home because I'm also Ghanaian, and for everybody who's listening, these are the issues that people are facing currently, with identification issues, through to protection, through to random advertisements, even for elections, text to vote for people and all of those. And you're wondering, how did the information get into such hands? Yeah. Like the Honorable Minister rightly said, if you are getting people to join or be actively participating on online spaces, it behoves on us to protect them as well. Yeah. Thank you for that. We are going to come back based on the enforcement and implementation part to look at what our rights are or what we can do as people who give data. So I'm going to come back to you, Honorable Neema, then I'll come back to Alhajie. So Honorable Neema, the question that I have for you is that right now the government is playing this role, like the Honorable Minister has said, legislation is enforced, but what role for us as citizens do we have to be able to enforce some of this right over information? What can we do as even just citizens or people who are users or on the online spaces?
That's a very interesting and tricky question because, as a user, unfortunately, when we go online, any app you download, there comes that thing long of terms of conditions, and for you to go to the next stage, you have to click I accept. Most of the times, whether you accept or not, if you want to use the app, you have to click accept. So I think most people first don't even read it. You just click accept and you want to move forward. So that is the first thing, in the sense that, some of these online different apps and platforms, if you have a comment or a reservation, then your only option is not to use it. There's no other way. So I think from a user's point of view, it's a bit complicated. What rights do we have? Because, for example, if you want a mobile number, you have to give out the details. If you want to open a bank account, you have to give out the details. If you want health insurance, you have to give out the details. If you want to be, like these days, let's say, like Clubhouse, you even have to prove your identity by giving your mobile number. There's an app called Signal. Very recently, a friend of mine told me to download it, but I had to delete it because I was getting like numbers that I don't have in my phone. I think people can search you and you get message requests. And suddenly, because this person has found your number, now they try and get you on WhatsApp. So there's a lot of issues there. And I think really, without having legislation in place, I don't think there's a way of protecting the user, because we need these services. But then now the question comes, if we want legislative protection, what should it look like? What's the best practice model? Because at the same time, the risk of us not having clarity on that is we as legislators can create a law that is so stringent that we get the likes of you, Lily, making noise and coming down our throats, that now we can't breathe. They're making the environment impossible. So how do we strike that balance? But it's clear, without a doubt, we need data protection, data privacy legislation. But what should it encompass? How should we do it? And I honestly think this is something that needs to be prioritized, but we need to work together. We parliamentarians need to get the opinions, challenges that the youth are experiencing, challenges that women are experiencing, elderly, even challenges that the government is experiencing. It's so common right now to find an official government letter with a stamp of confidential floating around WhatsApp. So the risk is both ways. But alongside all of this, I think, Lily, you pointed out that You know, we need to make the environments enabling for people to actually be online. But truth be told, the online environment is very toxic. If you're, especially for women, if you're a woman in media, journalist, socialite, celebrity, women in politics is even worse. The level of abuse, I can talk about as a parliamentarian, the level of abuse that we women parliamentarians get, the impact of that, it forces us to not be online. And if we are not online, then these discussions and developments will be happening without us. But when the time of making decisions, we will be making decisions in our own Stone Age kind of thinking while the world has moved forward. You know, I can just give an example. In Tanzania, we have about 143 female parliamentarians. But those of us who are active online, out of 143, it's a mere 10 or less. The rest don't want to be online because of the abuse. So how do we then make the environment safer? You know, there's this other thing of freedom of speech. So there is the issue of parody accounts, fake names, fake this. But is that conducive? I don't know. Those are things that we also need to look at, but we also need to task the social media platforms on these discussions, because they also have a role to play, as they're, you know, they are part of the problem by giving out our details and our information. They're selling it without our consent. But then again, maybe we've consented on those terms of conditions, which we rarely read.
Right.
Thank you, Lily.
Yes, absolutely. So now there's a need to find a balance between protection that really protects the citizen and one that's to a large extent does not also stifle innovation. So you want to make it a bit of a balance, one that protects, one that does not also stifle innovation or have people to explore on the internet. So the baseline now comes back to that threat online, but the threat should not let you not maximize the use of the internet. And that is why some of this awareness we are doing is necessary for you to know what is online, how you can stay protected, and for us to be able to build some awareness even around what is happening through legislation and what we can even do as citizens. So like you said, sometimes without legislation, it is hard for a normal user or a citizen to demand what it says that they usually would enjoy as a right. So what legislation exists? Do we even know it? And how do we make sure that we are demanding the right thing? Thank you, Honorable Neema. So based on what you shared and what Honorable Lamisi has also shared, we want to move to what can be done. I mean, we've pointed out the issues of infrastructure, even as foundational for people being on the online spaces, and we've seen the need for people, as many people, to be a part of the digitalization for a certain level of development. Now, we want to come back to you, Alhajie, and want to ask you for recommendations on how to galvanize progress on regional development, riding on the power of data. What are we using the data for? And how do you make sure that we galvanize this for development?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You know, I think this is becoming very interesting. And I just want to say a thing or two about what Neema just said a few minutes ago. About this data being collected and being sold or being used in a manner that we may not be aware or we have not given a consent. You know, I want to say two things here. I think in as much as the government or all government actually have responsibilities to protect the data of their citizens, I think the citizens also have a responsibility also. You know, we live in a world where, you know, it's borderless actually. Because when you go online, now you are outside your own country. You know, you communicate all over the place. You want to buy things or you want to use certain information and et cetera, et cetera. Now let's remember one thing. Those free things that you have downloaded on your phone to use or on your laptop to use, remember there are terms and conditions. And what I'm saying here is people need to read the terms and conditions. If you are satisfied with the terms of condition of usage, then you let it go, you go. And if you do not accept, then you move on and you stop it. Then also comes in cookies. You know, these cookies actually, they are embedded in these web browsers to be able to collect data from you. So essentially, the way you do things, the way you behave, where you, in fact, it actually captures your behavior online. So, and all these things now, you know, these are things that you can control as a person. I know government actually has a responsibility, but individual also we have a responsibility. I just wanted to bring that up as part of this thing. Okay. Now, going to this question you just asked about the recommendation on how to galvanize progress on these developments, I think it's very important that we talk to each other. It's very important. Talking to each other, forming alliances, learning from best practices, or looking at policies or strategy that work in Ghana or work in Nigeria or Burkina Faso or somewhere else, and learning from them does not take your sovereignty at all. And we must understand that. So what I'm saying here is we must be able to share ideas, especially things that actually work in this digital world. There's no individual country that has monopoly to information. It doesn't exist. And there's no individual person that also actually has monopoly to information. So the essence is we can learn, you can unlearn. What actually works, we share. What doesn't work, also we can learn from it to make it even better. So essentially what I'm saying here is we must work together as a continent. We must work together as a region to be able to share best practices, to be able to share what actually works in our own countries, where we can also do the same thing in our individual countries to make it even better. Now, again, this doesn't take away anything, from your sovereignty as a nation. And I give an example. We have seen how SARS work in many countries. That is the Computer Emergency Response team. There are many countries right now in Africa, outside Africa, that actually have those kind of teams that actually work with the government to respond to computer emergencies across. So these are best practices that we actually learn. So we can also learn from other institutions like the Africa Cyber Security Alliances, like we have also in Gambia, like the Gambia Cyber Security Alliance. So these are the kind of alliances that we really need to work together as a region to be able to learn from them. What are they doing? What is actually working? So what is actually working, we can take and adopt in our own countries. That's for the benefit of the entire continent. But what doesn't work also, what can we learn from those things? How and why? So for me, the essence here is we must be able to share, we must be able to learn from best practices, and we must be able to see that as a country, like the Gambia, for example, we cannot do it alone. We do not have monopoly to anything. What we have is we can learn, we can share ideas that actually work, and that's going to be for the betterment of the region and for the betterment of the entire continent itself. So let's learn to be able to share what actually works and to be able to collaborate in many things as far as cyber is concerned.
Right. That is so important that there is collaboration, even among member states, that there's a sharing of best practices and things that work for countries for us to be able to move forward when it comes to utilizing data and information to make development possible. Thank you, Alhajie. I'll be back to you because you're going to open the floor after our discussion for a few persons to ask questions. Please stay with us. We're going to come to you, Honorable Lamisi, and the question also will be around how we can really enforce these rights as citizens. You already touched on it a bit, and so I want you to touch on that also and move to some recommendations on how we can probably work with data for also development as a nation.
Thank you very much again. I share the views of my colleague MPs on the issue of collaboration. This is a network. It's about digitalization. It's about the world. It's about the continent. It's about the sub-region. And no particular country has the needed intelligence to do everything for that particular country. We need to share ideas. We need to collaborate with each other. We need to share whatever one country is doing right for all of us to come together. If not, in Ghana, we think we have the legislation, but people, the countries are so close that people can move from one country to the other, especially in the West African sub-region, where there is free movement of persons, goods, and services. So we need a collaborative effort to make sure that our data is protected. Another one that I want us to look at is about the telecoms. We should make sure that the telecoms, whatever they take from us, they are able to protect it. If they cannot protect our data, they shouldn't take our data from us. Because especially in Ghana here, it's becoming an issue of protection of people's personal data. And as individuals, one of the MPs rightly said that when you go into the net, there are certain things you see. And you don't need to click on it. But people just click. They say, click on this, and you click on it. And your information is picked. You need, as a person, to protect your personal data. When you go to an organization and you are not sure of whatever data they are looking for, you have the right. In the Act, the Data Protection Act, Act 838, says that when you get to an organization and you don't want to give your data, you don't have to give it because they need your consent. Consent is key in giving out your data. If you don't consent to it, for instance, if I'm doing something on the internet and they say click on this, if I don't consent to it, I would hold it. I don't release it. But if you, the moment you click on it, you have consented to whatever they are requesting for, and they are there to pick up your data. As individuals, we should be mindful that whatever data you put on the internet is used all over the world because we are in the digital world. And is it protected? Today, as I mentioned earlier on, the National Identification Authority has our data. We've linked it to our bank accounts. You've linked it to your credit card. You've linked it to your mobile number. How do you protect that data? So enforcement, as I mentioned earlier, is very, very key in our development. For instance, all 90 to 95% of the MPs, people have used our pictures, our bio data to create parallel Facebook accounts and using it to do people. So some of the MPs have decided that I don't go on social media. If you are not on social media, it is difficult for people to actually access your data. But you also need a social media. So which one? Choose which one can best protect your data. I, for instance, as an MP, I'm not on Facebook. You see my picture on Facebook, but I don't go to Facebook. Because Facebook, the data protection is so porous that a lot of people can just pick your information, create a parallel accounts, and use it to take money from people. Or, as we say, lack of data protection will also lead to cybercrime. And that is virtually what is happening in our countries or what is happening in the continent. So for us as Ghanaians, though the law is there, but as individuals, also take conscious efforts to make sure that you protect your data. And as we mentioned earlier, consent. For instance, when I was entering the building, if you have asked me, put on your particulars, I'll first ask you, why? And I want to find out whether if I put my particulars there, it is protected. Because once it's a book, somebody can come and just take it, look at it, take whatever information the person wants. Or the person was even coming with you. The person sees that you have entered the building, he will try to find out your information, pick the book, take it, and the person is gone. Is it protected? Organizations, various organizations in this country should be up and doing to make sure that when people provide them with the data when they enter the building, that particular book is well kept so that people don't come around, use our data, and at the end of the day, we have issues with them. For instance, when you go to the financial institutions, they say put down your data. The next minute, it's an advert. You can take a loan. Where do they get it? It's possible it's from it's possible it's from the same bank or from the financial institutions. So as a country or as a continent, I believe that there should be a roundtable conference of all the countries to come out with an idea, to come out with the best practice, to come out with the enabling legislation to make sure that all over the continent or all over the sub-region, we are able to protect our data. If not, we are, as I always say, we have a force to reckon with if our data is not protected. Most of, excuse my language, most of the organizations that we go around and do our activities, has somebody ever asked, why do you want to take my data? You don't. They just will put down your name. I'm in a hurry. One of the MPs mentioned it. They say click on it, and you click on it. You don't ask why you need to click on it. Do we read whatever we see on the net before we click on it? Your privacy is your privacy. You don't need to give it out to anybody when you are not ready to do that. If you give it out, we always say, when you think about the bad things, always think about the good things. Because as you give your information, good people are there to use it, bad people are there to use it. So it is a collaborative effort with the legislators, the implementators, and even the sub-region as large. Because if we don't do that, at the end of the day, one country can affect the other. We need to come together. Yeah.
Right. So thank you, Madam. So essentially, it's a shared responsibility. There's a role you have to play. There's a role I have to play. There's a role government, civil society, and many others have to play. So for us, it means you're your first protection. Ask yourself, why am I giving this out? Ask the organization, inquire, why do you need it, and all of that. But this goes beyond just the collection. We want to look at the usage and all of that. So we've had some of the views of our honorable members. We want to also see what your thoughts are and the questions you have regarding how this is used, the data that's actually collected for even development. We want to open the floor for a few questions that will come in, both on-site and online. And Joshua, please help me moderate on-site, and then we'll be able to have further input from our honorable ministers. We are at the top of the hour, and we want to allow about 10 more minutes to go through the questions. So I'm going to, in the chat, I have Mr. Olivier from Senegal, if I'm correct. I'm going to allow you the floor to ask your question now briefly, and then we'll come to Benjamin Akinmoyeje. Right. Mr. Olivier, the floor is yours. And the tech team would have to allow him rise to be able to speak. So I think that would be work done. Just in a short while, you'll be promoted from an attendee to a panel member, so you have the right to speak, and then we can move on. So tech team, kindly have a look at that and help us move them from audience to panel, and we can have them answer questions. Also on site though, there's no need to do the promotion from attendee to panel member, so we can have a question from on site if anyone is ready there. Any question for people on site? Right, I think, okay, we can go to Mr. Right, we can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. Are you hearing me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to participate on this IGF from Senegal.
We can hear you. We probably have lost Mr. Olivier, but I think Benjamin, you can also have your question now. We'll come back to Mr. Olivier.
Yeah, we also have an on-site question. After
Absolutely,
Benjamin.
we'll come there. Benjamin. We'll come back to on-site very soon. So we just have to go to Benjamin now, and we'll be right back.
Thank you very much. My name is Benjamin Akinmoyeje. Thank you for this rare opportunity. My question to the panelists will be the fact that we're talking about data innovations and privacy. And my question is, we're in the age where data has become the king, and it's an opportunity to leverage this opportunity that data gives us. So with so much emphasis on privacy, is there no chance that we are missing the opportunity that this new age of data is offering us? Because data in itself, it's of no use. If you keep all your data, it doesn't have. So how can we innovate around data? And my question, still leading on, is how can we be participants as individuals in the policies around data, the end users? How can we be participants in making rules and regulations around how data is governed, rather than lawmakers just making rules about data? So those are the two questions I have. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. So for our panel members, the floor is open. Maybe we'll start with Alhajie, and then if anyone has an input, please feel free to take the floor to answer. So the two questions, and let me reiterate, is how do we make sure that we don't stifle innovation by being rigid, or like Honorable Neema put it, being stringent with our policies? How do you make sure that we are using data for good and not stifling how it is used with policy? And then the second question is, how do we ensure that as end users, we have a say in policies around data protection and privacy and cybersecurity?
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is a really very good question, in the sense that, like they say, you can, bake your cake and eat it. The essence of actually having data is for somebody to be able to learn from that, for example, as a business, to give you products and services, for example. Now, there are some banks, for example, right now, if you have online banking, the moment you are making a payment, they're going to ask you what kind of payment. Is it about education? Is it about charity? Is it about electricity, or you name it? So what happens is the bank is actually trying to build something about you. The bank is trying to understand your behavior. The bank is trying to understand the way you spend your money. So in that case, the bank is trying to create a product that will actually suit you. So in that data that you give, the bank or the institution, for example, I'm just giving an example, is trying to understand you as a person. What do you like? What do you don't like? So the bank is going to try to offer you services based on what you really like. So if you keep your data to yourself, you don't want to give it to the bank, or you don't want to give it to any other institution, it's going to be difficult for them to create a product or a service that may suit your needs. So in a sense, I'm not saying give all the data, no, but I'm saying there's some aspect of you that people need to understand. Because even if you have a friend, like, tell me your friend, I'll tell you who you are. He said that's what it is. So you tell the bank or the institution about yourself, and they can tell you exactly who you are. So essentially, these institutions, they have a responsibility also to be able to keep the data. But we must also understand that they are collecting some of this data to be able to know you better, to be able to create a product or service to suit your needs. But the question now becomes, how do they protect that data? Is it meant for themselves, or is it meant for them to be able to sell to somebody else? I think that's exactly where the debate must be, that you collect on my behalf, so it means you cannot give it to somebody else. You can use it because I'm your customer, but it must be used purely on the business between you and myself, but not to be given to somebody else. Now, if I come to the second question, that's where people can be part of this lawmaking. Of course, yes. We have something they call public hearing. Once you have a bill in parliament, in most parliaments, I don't know what actually pertains in most countries in Africa, but I can give an example in Gambia. We have something we call public hearing. Once a bill comes to parliament, if I can give an example, we have this access to information bill. When it came, we invited a lot of stakeholders. We invited CSOs, we invited other stakeholders, journalists. All of them came, and then we discussed the bill in detail. So this public hearing actually gives you an opportunity to be able to understand really what the legislators are trying to do. And in fact, you can even make it richer by giving us suggestions, by giving us ideas where the parliamentarians are able to come up with a very nice act. Your representatives, they are not jack of all trades. They do not understand everything. So it's up to you to help us also to make it better. For example, if you check most parliaments, I can tell you 90% plus are not IT savvy, in the sense that they have very limited knowledge of ICT, So when bills come to parliament related to ICT, what they will do is they will consult with people that actually have a good knowledge, a good idea about it. And you being one of those people can actually help to make it even better. So in the Gambia, we do public hearing where we invite the public. we invite the stakeholders, we invite those that actually really matter pertaining to a particular subject for them to come. We have a discussion and they help us actually enrich that bill before it becomes law. That's what we normally do. And I think that same thing can also be done in other countries where the ordinary person, unquote, can come to Parliament and help you in terms of the capacity or in terms of giving you more understanding about where this law is trying to do. And I think when you do the public hearing, you can get a lot of feedback. And from us in the Gambia, for the past 2 years, it has been really very effective because it has enhanced the laws that actually make in this country.
Right. Thank you for the response, and thanks for reiterating the point that there is a need to do consultations for people who have expertise to be able to feed into what comes out as regulations, as policies, and all of that. Thank you. Any other panel member want to add anything to this? Briefly, they will take the question on site.
Yeah, as he rightly said, in Ghana here is the same process. But I think that to add to what he just mentioned, you don't eat your cake and have it. When you release the information, you have released that information already. But that information should be protected. For instance, as I mentioned earlier on, you have gone to the bank and you have released your information. The bank should make sure that that information is protected. I am not saying that I don't go on Facebook because there's a lot of activities going on. But if I'm going on Facebook, I should be able to make my account such that nobody should be able to go into the accounts again. You put on stringent measures to protect that particular accounts that you are giving out. So when you give your information to the NIA, the telecoms and other things, we are simply telling them that when people give you their information, try as much as possible to protect it for the citizenry. That is all that we are looking for.
Right. So there's a responsibility that is supposed to come from telcos, people collecting data. I mean, and essentially that's what we have, especially in Ghana, for when we think about Data Protection Commission and what they ask people to do, is for you to say what you're collecting, how you're going to use it, and to just make it very clear why it is you're collecting it, so that they can, the enforcement part, like Madam said, is still lagging, but how to make sure that what you said you're taking the information for is what you're using it for, and that people are protected doing some business or transaction or interaction with you. Thank you, Madam. So there are questions in the chat by Mr. Olivier that I'll read out, but Madam Mary indicated that there's somebody on the floor on site who was a question. So please, let's have the question on site.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Diza Akakpo from Ghana. Madam, we are talking about data protection, data innovation, and data privacy. My concern is that you go out there, you give the data to these companies, and tomorrow the data is out. Does that individual have the right to go and sue those organizations for misapplying the data? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The second hand is here. Please bring the mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Neema. I come from the internet. My own question is on data innovation. I live in Côte d'Ivoire. So when I go, I have a card. And as a citizen of Côte d'Ivoire or any other country, I have a national ID. And I believe that the Ministry of Information or the Ministry of Finance, I work as a government person, they have my data. My SIM card is also registered. But then every time in Côte d'Ivoire I go to do an admin, they ask me for the same data again. And I have to go either to the National Identification Office, for those who don't have the card, the new cards, the biometric cards, they call them. They have to do they have to swear an affidavit, something like that, and I pay. Tomorrow I go to to get my driver's license. They ask me for the same thing. I have to go back to, in Cote d'Ivoire, we do it at the police post, right? Or local government. I don't know what's the equivalent in English-speaking countries. I go back, they have to certify that it is me again. Tomorrow, I go to collect my pension. They ask me for the same ID, and I go back to verify myself again. So, how many governments are there in government? Sorry for that, because every time I have to pass an exam, I have to do that identification over again. It's not just the money, it takes the time. I get frustrated as a person. I'm asking because Honorable Neema is also here. I went to school in Ministry of Education. I passed exams. I submitted thumbprints, everything. Now there you have my blood even when you are doing PCR. You have everything about me. But every time I go to government to get an official thing done, they refer me again to go and prove the data that have been given all my life. So how does government innovate with citizen data? I'm not worried about the private sector. I'm talking about the legitimate data that I give to my government to make my life easy. Why can government not innovate in data? Have one data portal so that I don't have to be going up and down to prove that I am who I am, because you already know me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is spot on. Right. So I think that let's take these questions. And then we come back to the others in the room. So we'll have our honorable members respond to that. And I see there's a queue also there, and some hands here in the chat, and a question also in the chat. So please, we'll take Honorable Lamisi, come to Honorable Neema and Alhajie for their input also.
Thank you so much for the questions. The first question talks about legislation, and then if your privacy is invaded, whether you can go to court. Yes, it depends on the angle from which you are coming from. Did you give the data yourself? Did you consent to it? If you can prove to them that you didn't consent to giving that data, why not? You can go to court. Because the Act has specifically mentioned that you can't use somebody's data when the person has not given you the consent. And consent has been mentioned. And I would like to indulge your audience and maybe take you to where consent is in our Act. Just a minute. All your rights are there. Or if you actually read the Act, all your rights are there. So if you don't know your rights, you don't know the law. So before you give your information, kindly know what your right is before you give your information or your consent. I'm trying to get it for you, what consent says about your information. Anyway, I will get it later on for you, but let him come to my sister. My sister, what you have said is right, basic. I'll give you my own experience. When, when my late husband passed, I have his SNIT card, I have his driver's license, I have his national health insurance, but every point I move to, I have to provide his data. Again. But what I have seen in recent times is that the National Identification Authority is trying to cure that mischief in Ghana here. And that is why we are talking about sharing of information among the countries in the sub-region or the continent as a whole. currently what is going to happen with the National Identification Card or authority is that all the information, all your data that they have taken, and that is why I am particular about data protection. And that the National Identification Authority is a data innovation in Ghana here. We are linking your national identification to your account number, your salary, your SNIT, your social security, your phone number, such that the moment they put the key in your card, wherever organization you go, you are going to take driver's license. They say, bring your card, your national identification card. You just give it to them. They put in the information, and they are able to get it for you. You don't need to go to submit different information all the time, swearing affidavit and all the time. The only place where we swear an affidavit now is when you lose it. When you lose your driver's license, when you lose your passport, you need to have an affidavit. You need to have a form from the police head office. So currently, it's even difficult for you to commit a crime. If you commit a crime, the moment they take your Ghana card, they key in, everything comes out. Your fingerprint, everything is there. So it's one of the data innovation that we have in this country. So I believe if the other countries are able to emulate it, it will go a long way to help us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam. And I know Honorable Neema and Alhajie would want to add to this, but let's take a few questions, and probably in your submission you can add it. We are going to have to do this a bit more quickly so that we can have our session end right on time. So we have also in the chat a few questions, and I'm going to read that to you. So Mr. Olivier asked about our parliamentarians aware of the AUC guidelines on data protection. And he goes on to say, what is the relationship between our parliamentarians and the data protection agents and then the data protection authorities? So first is, are the parliamentarians aware of the AUC guidelines on data protection? And he's also asking about the relationship between parliamentarians and then data protection agencies. So we can take Madam Neema and Alhajie and then go back to the queue, which you have online for 2 persons. And then we can have maybe 2 persons also on site quickly, and then we can round off our session. So the floor is yours, Honorable Neema.
Thank you. I think the most relevant to me, I would respond to my dear sister, Nena, her name is almost like mine. I hope I pronounced it correctly.
Yeah.
Basically, she spoke about the multiplicity of the identifications that we have. And coincidentally, just last week, my colleague in Parliament, Honorable Jerry Sla, he tabled this issue in Parliament in the sense that why does he have over 10 IDs which he needs to use in the same government offices? And so this is something that it's across developing countries. And I think one ways in which we can achieve the digital transformation that we're talking about is to ensure that if you have the national ID, that should be able to suffice for all. But then perhaps the challenge now is the different government organizations were collecting their data in silo. So there needs to be a best practice on how to merge it all together. The other thing that I can quickly say is there's been a lot of talk in the sense that if you don't want to give your data, if you don't accept the terms and the conditions, you have the option of not using it or rejecting it. But truth be told, for example, the mobile network that I'm using, I didn't consent anywhere that I want to receive promotional text messages. But what ground is giving them that ability? And even if I wanted to go to court, there needs to be a law that permits me to go to court. So I think there's still gaps in place, but it's very important for Africa as a bloc to speak together. And I think as a bloc, we may have a stronger argument of even changing the behaviors of the mobile networks, the social platforms, as well as the government. So I think it's something that we need to do. We need to work together instead of working in silos, because even in the AU, it's talking about the Africa transformation strategy, Africa digital transformation strategy, but then when you go to each African country, it's already broken down in silos. So we need to come back together. Thank you.
Absolutely, the need for collaboration and for the communication among different agencies. And to you, Alhajie, your take on the questions that have come in.
Yeah, thank you very much. First, I just want to respond to the person that asked the question, like the invasion of privacy, whether you can take somebody to court. Well, it depends on the issue, and it also depends on what country you are in. For example, if you are in the Gambia, it may be very difficult. And I give an example on the Information and Communication Act of 2009, which is a law that currently exists in the Gambia. It says a person may send or instigate the sending of electronic mail for the purpose of direct marketing, where the person has obtained the contact details of the recipient of that electronic mail in the course of the sale or negotiation for the sale of a product or service to that recipient. So in the Gambia, it may be almost very difficult for you to do that because of already the Communication Act of 2009 has given that company the powers to take your information and send you direct in terms of sales is concerned. So it's already very clear. It may be difficult, but I don't know what happened in other countries. I know in Gambia it may be difficult, but we are working with the ministry in actually changing this law, because for me it doesn't make sense. Because I need to be aware whenever you're going to make whenever you're going to sell me something or you're going to send my information to anybody else, I need to be aware of that. Now the second question also by Madam, the problem we have is Africa is we don't have e-government, or most governments do not have e-government strategies or e-government portals that capture all the details of their citizens. And that's the reason why you'll see somebody in Africa here, or in West Africa, or Gambia, for example, they will carry an ID card, they will carry a driver license, they will carry a voter's card, and they will carry a health insurance card. They may even end up carrying 5 or 6 different cards, and it's the same person. So what that means is the government does not have the electronic information or the electronic person or the electronic version of their own citizens with them. The only thing they have is the physical person. So when Madam Neema goes to get a driver license, they ask all the information again. When Madam Neema goes to a clinic, they ask all the information again, because there does not exist an e-government portal for the particular country where all the information about their citizens actually are stored, which means they have one-stop shop where they can get all the information about their citizens. Now, the other question dealing with the AUC guidelines on data protection. Personally, I'm aware for a fact that, because I'm in the business of IT, ICT is my background. And secondly, also, I work in the Pan-African Parliament as a legislator. So I'm aware of all these guidelines that the AUC actually has brought in terms of data protection. Now, the relationship between Parliament and the data protection agencies. I think, yes, I think the relationship is mutual, meaning we play oversight, meaning we have to check on what they do, and that's whether they are in line with the laws and regulations of the country. So that's exactly where parliamentarians are. And for the Gambia, actually, I think the relationship is very cordial, but oftentimes we play oversight role on them, try to find out what they do, and to see that whether what they're doing is actually in line with the rules and regulations of acts of parliament. So we have very good relationships, and but sometimes also we may see instances where institutions may not be doing what it's actually supposed to be doing. So in that case, those protection agencies would play their role, and then Parliament actually come next in case they don't. But there's a relationship.
Right. Thank you so much. So I mentioned before that we're going to do 2 questions here and 2 questions on site, but I'm going to do 1 question here online and 1 on site. So please, can our on-site people, on-site person ask the question, and then I see that there is somebody also reacquainted a question that has been asked already, so that has been answered. But please, let's have the one on-site ask his question now, his or her question now.
Okay, go ahead.
Merci bien, je vais parler en français pour bousculer un peu la salle. Ok, vous n'aimez pas porter les casques, oui. En fait, je voudrais faire un commentaire. Tous nos pays au niveau de la CEDEAO sont en train de changer de paradigme. Au Bénin aujourd'hui, avec l'identification nationale, vous avez un seul numéro pour d'application et toutes les plateformes qui existent, que ce soit pour la carte d'identité, le passeport, le permis, tout cela en un seul numéro, on peut vous retrouver, y compris la fiscalité. C'est ça qui est important pour l'État. Et au niveau de la région, nous avions un projet qu'on appelle le projet régional d'identification des personnes, le projet WURI, qui est en train de s'implémenter dans chacun des pays de la CEDEAO pour aider à avoir une base unique d'identification des citoyens de la CEDEAO.
So as to have a single database for all ECOWAS citizens.
Excuse me, please can you ask again so that the translation can go on?
Okay. Can I repeat again? Je disais qu'au Bénin,
I was saying that in Benin,
nous avions aujourd'hui la possibilité avec le
today
numéro
we have
d'identification unique
the possibility
d'avoir accès à tous les services publics.
with one number to have access to all public
Pour faire ma carte
services.
d'identité, pour faire mon passeport, je rentre juste mon
Sorry,
numéro
we're losing the speaker.
NPI et
With
toutes
my
les
ID,
autres applications.
sorry, we're
sont
losing
mises à ma
the
disposition.
network is very
Juste le
unstable.
clic,
The interpreter can
l'acceptation
hardly hear
permet
the
au
speaker.
système de me
It's
donner
going on
un
and off.
rendez-vous pour avoir la carte d'identité, un rendez-vous pour avoir le passeport. C'est pareil pour
It
tous
is
ceux qui veulent
similar
payer leur impôt, c'est pareil pour tous ceux qui veulent avoir le permis de
for
conduire.
taxes.
Et je disais que pour la CEDEAO,
And I was saying that for ECOWAS, sorry,
qui est
we
mise en place pour
hear
permettre
one
d'avoir une
sentence
base
and the
unique
next
d'identification
sentence
des
is
citoyens
off.
de la CEDEAO.
It's difficult to.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
He's saying in Benin, they're actually having the same one government ID policy, and with the card across all government platforms, especially taxes, that all you need is that one ID number. And he's saying that actually there was a program, there was a project for the regional project, the Muri project for West Africa, to get a streamless data interoperability across countries. That was it wasn't a question, but a contribution.
Right. Thank you so much. So we are at the top of our hour. We've had our honorable members give us recommendations. We've had them talk to us about the issues on the ground. And there are some questions in the chat. One very important one, which talks about how government can collaborate with private sector for effective data protection. If our honorable members can, please engage the person who has a question in the chat so that we can be able to round this up. As a matter of urgency, we've seen the need for data protection. We have seen that there is a shared responsibility across stakeholders to be able to make sure that we are having data innovation and also data protection for users and essentially towards development. So there's a clarion call on all of us and for all of us to make sure that even as parliamentarians, we take these issues back, issues that we've heard from participants on the call, those in the chat, to be able to also table it in Parliament and to make sure that there is some implementation and enforcement, which we've realized as a gap to be able to close when it comes to working with data and also to move towards innovating around data. I want to especially thank all of the honorable members, from Honorable Neema from Tanzania to Honorable Alhajie from Gambia. And then we have our own Honorable Lamisi, resident in Ghana and part of the Ghanaian Parliament. We appreciate the time. Thank you for the work you're doing in the space and for being the voices on awareness creation in Parliament and around your countries and the South region for the work that you do. We appreciate you and your time. Please engage in the chat for questions that have gone unanswered. And I want to appreciate all the audience for your participation. Thank you and do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is Lily right? Yes. Okay.
Thank you. So we can take a photo with her.